Okay, welcome everyone to MADWeb 2025. This is the 7th edition of the workshop. So nice to barely see you here because I got a light that is so strong that I cannot see much. We also got the largest room of all of them, but yeah, nice to see so many of you here. So my name is Marco Squarcina. I'm one of the co-chairs of this year edition. We are 3 co-chairs this year. You will understand soon why. I'm together with Limin and Inzi. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with MADWeb, what is MADWeb? It's a workshop that started in 2019 with the idea of attract researchers working on any topics in web security and privacy, and also to create a platform where academic researchers like me can meet with people working in the industry, especially browser vendors, but also other key players. Indeed, like today, we will have talks from Google, from Mozilla, and also Keynote from Mozilla, which is extremely good. Also, we wanted to encourage everyone to explore novel ideas before publications, because authors can opt out from the proceedings, so they can resubmit the paper later at a top conference. And from this year, also, we welcome explicitly provocative ideas. Things that might break the web platform and might not be accepted at the top conference because of compatibility issues. But we want to think about provocative ideas that might redesign the web platform for security and privacy. News for this year. So we decided to merge, so last year we decided to merge SecWeb and MADWeb in one single workshop to avoid fragmentation in the community. This worked well because we got many more submissions than the 2 single workshops. And also we wanted to keep the quality of submitted papers, of accepted papers pretty high, okay? Taking inspiration from what we did in the past at SecWeb, we introduced a mentoring program. This is also an opportunity for young researchers to start getting familiar with the process of peer reviews that is a bit opaque for them if they never started doing that. So the idea is that you get a mentor. This mentor will share their tips with you, and then they will also check your review, discuss with you how to improve it, how to change the tone, what to focus on, and so on and so forth. We got 16 applications for the mentoring program in terms of mentees. We had to accept only 8, but we had 4 mentors, so thanks to all of you who were willing to serve in the mentoring program. Also, we introduced this year a very lightweight artifact evaluation. It was successful on one hand because we got 14 PC members who were willing to participate in the artifact evaluation, but only 1 paper that unfortunately was not accepted that opted in for the artifact evaluation. This is kind of expected because papers at the workshop are typically more conceptual than full papers submitted at other conferences, but I think it was still a good idea to keep it in the workshop for the future. And also we have social networks this year, and the logo and the website. So follow us on Blue Sky, Mastodon, and X. These are the 3 social networks where we are present. And use the hashtag MADWeb and NDSS Symposium 2025. I will also be your photographer for today. Tried last year at SecWeb, didn't work out well, but today you have a better lens. So I will try to get nice pictures of all of you. If you are not feeling comfortable being in the pictures, just let me know, and I will avoid taking pictures of you, okay? And with this, I'm very happy to give the stage to Limin.
Okay, so this is stats. The most important part is the last point on this chart. So basically, because we merged the 2 workshops, this year we got 21 submissions. Among the 21 submissions, we accepted 12 total. 9 of them are full papers. The other 3 are work in progress, shorter papers. So it seems like this is a great benefit that now the community finally come together to have one workshop. Now we concentrate our effort on this workshop. All right, so this is the program for today. So I have 2 keynotes, one now, happening now in a couple of minutes. Then we'll have a break, then we'll have 3 technical sessions. The afternoon keynote starts after the afternoon break, so don't miss that one. And in the end, right before closing, we'll present our Best Paper Award. This is sponsored by Palo Alto Networks, and we thank them for their sponsorship. And many thanks to all the organizers here at NDSS helping us organize this workshop. Also our steering committee, I think Nick is here. Who else is here? Oh, Zabar is here. Yeah, Alex is here. Yeah, Zabar is here. Yeah, if you're here, Aurora is also here. If you're here, thank you so much. And all the committee members come together to put the work to actually select the good papers to present here. Thank you as well. So without further ado, we're going to, oh, the other thing, did I say this? Oh, we want to do a photo. It's going to be right after the lunch, right before the afternoon session. That's the time we decide?
Can do it like at the end or after the lunch session?
Maybe not have more people?
Yeah.
After lunch or?
After lunch.
After lunch, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe right before the afternoon session. The session starts at 1:30, so maybe come here at 1:20, then we'll have a photo. There's a nice backdrop here. We can take a photo together. I forgot about that announcement. All right.
We definitely have good lighting.
Yeah,
so
we'll have nice
visible
lighting
for
here.
sure.
Yeah, so enjoy the workshop, now we'll jump into the invited speaker, first keynote. Let's welcome Nick to the stage. Now we actually have a stage. All right.
That was not.
Hey,
I just tried it. Yeah.
all right. It's my great pleasure to welcome Nick at our first keynote. Nick is a professor at Stony Brook University, and his group has been working on impactful and interesting work in networking and web security. And his paper has won a lot of best paper awards. And most recently, NSA has awarded his work on certificate transparency for best scientific cybersecurity paper. So today, Nick is going to tell us about content integrity. Let's welcome Nick again.
All right. Thank you all for being here. So this talk is supposed to essentially present to you about 10 years worth of research with one culmination point, that is the point of content integrity. So, and I hope I do this justice, and that I can impart you with a vision about the future of the web. So, if you don't know me, I'm an associate professor at Stony Brook University, that's on Long Island, New York. And with my students, we do everything related to the web. So this has taken different forms over the years. We've looked at web tracking, we've looked at browser fingerprinting, we've looked at debloating web applications, deploying honeypots, looking at extensions. So anything related to the web, we try to be active inside of it. So how many of you have seen a triangle with the CIA acronym before? Okay. The rest of you are maybe shy. But if you've taken at least one security course by any university in the world, someone has shown you this triangle and has essentially superimposed these words, confidentiality, integrity, and availability on that. And it's essentially the standard properties that we want to preserve in any security system. And I would like to convince you that confidentiality and availability are very straightforward, but integrity doesn't get all that much love. So confidentiality, essentially, let's protect the systems, let's make sure that the systems, the data are only available to the people that should have access to it. Availability, let's make sure that software is available for use, we don't have any DDoS attacks, but integrity is less well defined, right? What do we mean that we want to protect data from unauthorized access or from unauthorized edits? Like, what does that exactly mean? So today's talk will focus exactly on this. This works? Maybe not. Sorry. Okay, so we will focus indeed on integrity. Okay, so as I said earlier, I would like to impart you with a new filter of looking at the world, and essentially convince you that there is all sorts of different attacks that we've seen over the years, where there's different bad guys and different good guys and different systems getting attacked, and we've given them different names, but they're actually all the same thing. At least that's what I hope to convince you at the end. So most of you know these keywords, right? SEO poisoning, we understand this. We understand malvertising. We understand people forgetting to register the domain names, so they expire and they fall in the hands of wrong people. The odd one out may be the bottom right one, which is media trust hits another historic low. Again, I would like to convince you that they're all actually the same thing. And for that, we have to go back. So we have to go back to 2011, and essentially I am with my wife. We are on our honeymoon in Curacao, and like every reasonable person on their honeymoon, I'm thinking about JavaScript. And I'm thinking about how it is that we actually integrate JavaScript in websites, right? So here we have an example website, and we want to essentially pull libraries in that are of use, right? So we pull in jQuery to make it easier for us to write JavaScript. We pull in Google Ads. We pull in a Facebook SDK for comments, and we pull in a Twitter gadget for likes and for tweeting, right? And this is great. This works great, and we get all of this functionality for free. But at the same time, if we step back and we think about it, we are trusting every single one of these entities now for JavaScript code. So if they are compromised, right, or if they turn malicious, now suddenly they have full access to our website. And they can do, once their JavaScript runs in our own origin, they can do whatever it is that they want to do on our own site. And thinking of that, I thought, okay, wouldn't it be cool if we actually map these trust relationships on the web? Let's just crawl the web as much as we can, and let's figure out who pulls JavaScript from whom. And we are essentially looking at the beginnings of a supply chain ecosystem, but we didn't quite have that terminology 13 or 14 years ago. And if we have this trust relationship, maybe if I cannot hack you directly, maybe I can hack a website that you trust for JavaScript and therefore just get to you when that JavaScript pull occurs. And there was an example that happened at the time. There was this jQuery plugin called Qtip. It may still be around. And they were actually compromised for about a month before the developer realized that this was happening. And their jQuery plugin was hot-linked into websites. So the developer put in this red banner on his website saying, if you actually downloaded jQuery, my plugin, between this date and that date, you have to go back and refresh because we were compromised during that time. So that was essentially the focus of this work. And since we're looking at all of this giant map of the web and who trusts who, can we actually find interesting attack vectors related to JavaScript that we didn't know of before? And so that's what we did. We crawled about 3 million pages belonging to the Alexa at the time top 10,000. And those of you who do this kind of research today, you have a much nicer way of crawling the web. At the time, we found this Java browser used for unit tests that supports JavaScript, and we kind of instrumented that to be able to crawl the web and run the JavaScript to reveal extra trust relationships where you need JavaScript to run in order to figure them out. And we found about 8 million remote inclusions in this crawl, 300,000 JavaScript files, and 20,000 uniquely addressed hosts, right? That was essentially our map of these trusts on the web. And that was our paper at CCS 2012. And we had a lot of interesting statistics. That table may look familiar to you today. So essentially, what are the most popular JavaScript libraries being pulled? On the client side, we still have Google Ads, we still have Google Analytics, right? Some of the other social media tracking companies may have fallen out of favor, like AddThis. But the top 10 doesn't look all that different today than it did in 2012 and in 2011. And at the bottom right, we essentially have the number of hosts trusted by any given website in the top 10,000. And of course, we have this skewed right distribution. And if you pay attention to these two little red circles there, essentially we had top 10,000 websites that in aggregate were trusting close to 300 remote hosts for JavaScript, right? And so if you think about a supply chain attack, any one of these remote hosts getting compromised means that an attacker is able to essentially push malicious JavaScript into that main page. So, and since we do have this corpus of vulnerabilities, this corpus of trust relationships, is there something that we can find in this giant 8.5 million script inclusions that we didn't know before? And in the paper, we had a bunch of things that were cool. But for today's talk, we'll just focus on the stale domain-based inclusions. So this was news to me when we were doing the study, but essentially, if you think about the interaction between the web and DNS, we reference remote scripts using domain names. Domain names can expire, but the links to these scripts do not go away when domains expire. So an attacker who is able to find this can just register the right domain, put the right file in the right path, and now serve malicious JavaScript to all the sites that were pulling that file in the past, right? And so again, this is happening on the popular web, right? So we found 56 domains used in 47 sites, and we actually registered 2 of these domains. You can see on that little table. We registered blogtools.us and hbotapadmin.com. You may be able to figure out who was trusting HBO tapadmin. And by looking at the referrer headers of the requests that we started receiving, we could essentially find who was trusting these pieces of JavaScript, right? And essentially, we have this pre-done XSS for us, right? Just register the right domain, put the right file in the right path, and you have cross-site scripting ready. No vulnerability, no other exploitation required. So we published that work. You know, I was very proud of it. It was my first top-tier paper. And years passed, and we worked on other things, which felt at the time very different. So one of these different things, well, we started looking at web shells. And if you're not familiar, web shells are these malicious files, typically written in PHP, that attackers upload to servers that they compromise, to web servers, so that they have a backdoor access. So you can use this web shell to navigate the file system of the server, to reach other internal hosts. You can do brute forcing of a SQL database from that web shell. So it's essentially just an attacker's toolkit to keep and expand his access on the server. Minimally, they can look like a single line of PHP code, just read a parameter from the attacker and just evaluate it on the server. But the actual web shells look like full-blown web applications. They have a full file manager. They have all the other functionality available to them. And if you actually try to look at the source code of these web shells, it looks a little bit like that, right? So obviously, they don't want you to know how it is that they do things, and they want it to be polymorphic so that they can essentially, it's hard for you to grab one signature and put it in your antivirus. They can just keep changing again and again. And so in that study, we said, okay, let's actually just study these web shells, right? Let's just collect as many web shells as possible. Let's find out how they work, what functionality they offer to attackers, and interestingly, do they have any home phoning capabilities, right? So if I upload a web shell to a compromised site, will that web shell tell anyone else that this just happened, right? Essentially, maybe tell the original author of that web shell, hey, I just compromised a new server, right? Essentially, this parasitic relationship. So we collected a bunch of data, and we normalized and we deobfuscated, and we built this kind of infrastructure where essentially we took these web shells and we deployed them for real on web servers with real domain names, and we pretended that these were infections. And we were essentially collecting data from the browser and from the server to see who is being told that this web shell is executing while it is executing, right? To find out what are the potential attackers who come in later at that specific file path searching for this shell that was uploaded to the server. And we found that 29% of the shells were actually telling someone that they were running, but from the client side. So it was the browser of the attacker which was volunteering to the world that this web shell was being used, and 5% only were actually telling someone from the server side. So once they were executing, the server would phone home to someone and would tell them that, hey, I'm running on this new server. And we looked at the targets that were being home phoned, and you can see here our popular ones, and a lot of them were analytics, but others seem to be maybe let go, right? They were like the most popular one, allturks.com. When we tried to visit it, it was a park domain. And clearly, this couldn't have always been a park domain. There must have been some use for the attacker at some point, but then this domain was left to expire, it was picked up by a parking company, and that was serving ads. And so again, now you may be able to start connecting things, right? Could it be that in the same way that we have benign web applications that are trusting other servers for JavaScript, could we have the exact same phenomenon on malicious web applications, right? And we do. And we registered these partially anonymized stale domain names. And we just essentially set up web servers and we started listening. And we started receiving this large number of requests, not from attackers, but from actually compromised systems, right? So we were just sitting back, and the compromised systems where the web shells were uploaded were now phoning home, but we were the home, right? And that's essentially how it looks. We would get either from the attacker's browser or from the compromised server, we would get the request. We would know where the request is coming from the referrer header. And if we were attackers, we would just go to this URL, and that's where the shell was. So we could essentially take over the shell of the attacker or do whatever it is that we wanted to do. And if you read the paper, we had a lot of varied businesses. So we started getting requests from an order service in Iran, or a travel portal in China, a college website in Morocco, a hospital website in Peru, a legal consult office in Russia. These were all compromised by individual actors, but they were uploading the same shells, and these websites now were phoning home to us. So here's where we are so far. We have established that both benign and remote web applications have dependencies. And when these dependencies happen over the network, these can expire. And then other attackers can take over these dependencies and compromise either the benign web applications or the actual malicious web applications and take control of them. So if we take a step back from this observation, we can essentially say that web applications receive code and data that is different than what was originally intended. Right? That's a claim that we can easily make. The popular website on Alexa is now getting something or getting nothing that is different from the original expectation, and the malicious web shell is getting something that is different from what the author of that shell intended. So the integrity of these remote dependencies has essentially been violated. And we can now try to look at user-generated content, right? So we looked at websites, benign and malicious. What about platforms, right? And so we will just focus on the social media that many people love to hate, Twitter or X. But what we'll say here will just generalize to any other platform. So we have here 3 examples: the Twitter account of MADWeb, of NDSS, and of the Internet Society. And if we look at these as URLs, they are essentially structured like this, right? We have just the name of the platform / the name of the account, right? Now the question is, what happens if these accounts ever change their usernames, right? What if MADWeb work decides to become MADWeb, or NDSS Symposium wants to put an underscore between NDSS and Symposium? What actually happens to these URLs? Well, what happens to the one that you leave after you get a new one, right? So we published a paper in 2017 where we studied exactly that phenomenon, right? We studied, okay, how many of these names are abandoned and how many are taken over by other accounts after they're abandoned, right? And if you think about it now on the web, you have all of these links that are external to Twitter. They were pointing into these accounts. Now, when the accounts change names and another user takes this old username, the links are still the same, right? So now you are just taking in users to someone else's Twitter account, right? Not to the original Twitter account, because the URL stayed the same, but the content that you're getting changed, right? And this thing happened last year that essentially showed that we were a little bit ahead of time with that study. So in the cryptocurrency world, there is these heists, and there was a heist that happened like 2 weeks ago, and it was, again, JavaScript-based. But the one we will talk about today was from 2024. So there was this person that essentially got hacked, and he had $250,000 drained from his crypto wallet in the summer of 2024. And there was this post-mortem analysis of how this hack happened. And now, this started on social media. So this user was approached by someone important, seemingly important, and told, hey, I want to interview you, I want to give you VC funds. And the person that approached him was, again, he claimed to be Peter Lauten, who is an investor in one of these cryptocurrency companies. And if you look at the screenshot here, you will see that Peter Lauten once had a Twitter username, Peter_Lauten. That's the embedded tweet. I don't know if I can point it right here. But after some time, he just changed the username to Lauten, right? So that is this over here. An attacker found this out and obtained the old username of Peter Lauten. And to make things worse, as we said, there is these web links that are pointing to current and past usernames. So on the website of that company, where this investor works, they were linking to the old Twitter account. So the link from the outside was to Peter_Lauten, because that was the old link, not to Lauten. So this essentially, completed the facade of legitimacy and This person essentially was trusted. He convinced this person to download a special, I think it was a special web conferencing software, like not Zoom, but something else. It was malware, and it just grabbed all the cryptocurrencies from that person's machine. Right, so we can see a very specific attack with a very specific dollar sign that is based on this content integrity idea. And based on what we said today, we can sort of obviously deduce this. We can deduce that if today I tweet something, or if I post it on your favorite social media, and that thing embeds a URL, that URL could expire given enough time, and given enough time, it can fall in the hands of attackers. So retroactively, I'm now pointing to the wrong thing. I'm not pointing to the thing that I once pointed, once I tweeted, or once I posted, right? But could we actually go even beyond that, right? Could we actually have links that we don't even intend to have as links? And here's an example, right? So this is me being very excited to be here, and in my excitement, I forgot a space, right? Twitter doesn't know that. Twitter doesn't know that I intended to have a space between MADWeb and it. So it thinks that I'm linking to madweb.it, the TLD of Italy. So I can post this, and the only thing that protects me possibly is this highlighting that now this is blue instead of black, right? But of course, for most regular people, this means nothing. And it will, of course, be dependent on the client that you use. So you could very well post a link that you never intended in the first place. So we have this phenomenon of users posting accidental links, because they are omitting a space accidentally, because they are trying to save space, so they don't put spaces, not really realizing what it is that they are doing, right? And because of our ever-expanding set of TLDs, more and more words become possible, regular English words become possible TLDs, right? So it, online, me, you, us, is, in, so, these are very regular English words that you would use to start a sentence, but they're also TLDs. And so an attacker can now just register that domain name after the fact. So you can tweet something that points to nowhere, an attacker can see this, register that nowhere, and now suddenly get all of that residual traffic from your account. And we have some real examples ranging from politicians to various types of celebrities. And we published a paper in 2021 where we studied exactly that. We studied it for 7 months, and we had this machine learning classifier that just identified 26,000 accidental URLs. And the heuristics were very reasonable and simple as to when a URL is accidental. And we registered 45 of these domain names to, again, understand how much traffic we're getting. And while we did not drown in HTTP traffic, we did get traffic, of course, that we would never have gotten without these registrations. If you look at the top right, depending on how far you are from the screen, we have this classification of linked domain names that were not registered at the time when they were tweeted, and links to ones that were registered at the time that they were tweeted. And there is, as you can see, one celebrity that really hates spaces. And so, you know, most of these belong to this one specific celebrity with 13 million followers. So that's like the wrong combination. The person who dislikes spaces and also has a massive following of possible victims. So let's take, again, stock, giving up my joke, let's take stock of where we are. We have all of these different problems with different names. JavaScript dependencies in benign web applications, JavaScript dependencies in web shells, platform-specific issues, malicious websites that cloak. So when Google goes to the website, they show something, but when you go to the same website, they show something else. And malicious ads, which when visited by the ad company, they show something benign. After it goes into circulation, they switch it to being something malicious, right? So we have all of these attacks with all these different names. And my claim is that these are all the same problem. They're the problem of content integrity violations. So can we go deeper? So far, we've talked about attacks in a traditional sense. Bad guy, good guy, register the website, send you malicious JavaScript, phishing, steal your cookies, do something bad. Can we actually have a middle ground? Someone behaving in a way that's not quite malicious, like, you know, Hollywood malicious, but also not quite what users would like from the web. So let's go on a little trip for that. This is the website of the Internet Society over the years. For some reason, NDSS's website only goes to 2017 on the Wayback Machine. I don't know what happened before that, so I had to go with Internet Society. And you can see that as time progresses, websites become cleaner and they adopt more technologies and they're cooler, right? So of course, the 2003 Internet Society website looks nothing like the 2025 one. So we understand intuitively that websites change, right? We realize this. However, if we think about this in the context of today's proposal or in the context of today's talk, we perhaps realize that when we're linking to a resource, we're not really linking to a resource. We're linking to a server that holds a resource. And the server just will give us whatever it wants to give us, right? So intuitively, if you look at the bottom of this slide, we have these two URLs. We have example.com and example.com/a very specific and important thing. And we, again, intuitively, we feel that example.com is free to change and adopt new technologies and become cooler and cleaner over time. But this information that is located in a very specific page of this site, we expect this to sort of not do that. Like whatever this very specific and important thing said today, we expect that it will say tomorrow, because it's not just like the storefront, it's a very specific piece of information that is being referenced. The problem is that this doesn't necessarily hold this assumption of ours. There was in the subreddit of politics, there was a flare that administrators could add to the websites being linked that was called title change. And they were manually essentially saying that an article posted on this subreddit changed its title after it was posted. So when it was first posted, the article had a specific headline, and sometime later, the article changed the headline, right? Which again shows you that, well, maybe these very specific and important things are not quite as immutable as we perhaps assume them to be. So our question was, well, does this actually happen? How often does it happen? And why is it happening? Why are websites, benign websites, again, this is not attacker.com, this is a news site. Why are they actually changing their content after it is published, after links have been created for that content? So we built, again, a crawling system. We tracked about 500,000 articles over 6 months. We collected the before and the after of the headline changes, and then we fed this into off-the-shelf NLP code that essentially compares the difference in strings, right? Like how different is it, not syntactically, but semantically. How different is the new string compared to the old string, the new headline compared to the old headline? And so we categorize these changes into 9 categories, including paraphrasing, dynamic updates, emotionalism, and neutralization. And we didn't quite expect this, but 7.5% of articles changed at least once, right, over our period of study. If you look at the top right, that is the edit time histogram. So most of these changes were happening in the first day after the article was published. Most of them were paraphrasing and dynamic updates, and the little table there essentially is sorted, reverse sorted by the BERT score. So the lower the BERT score, the more different the change, the updated title is compared to the original title. And so BuzzFeed essentially would change 44% of its articles and would radically change the title of an article after it was posted. Then you can read the rest of that table if you so wish. So let me give you an example of what these look like. So dynamic updates are the most benign ones that you perhaps think are fine. That's just the nature of the web. You have something happening that then changes. You have Yankees leading with 1-0, and then they lead with 3-0. It's the same article, it's the same URL, it has been dynamically updated. You have some tragedies around the world where the 6 deaths become 7 deaths, and the 18 kills become 22 kills. Okay, that's the web, it's dynamically updated. Maybe you think this is fine, and perhaps it is. So let's look at some other more spicy ones. The left one, on the first one, says 1 dose of J&J vaccine is ineffective against Delta, study suggests. This changes to J&J vaccine may be less effective against Delta, study suggests. Yeah? 2 different messages being communicated over this headline. Malawi burns thousands of COVID-19 vaccine doses. How dare they? Malawi burns thousands of expired AstraZeneca COVID-19 doses. Right? depending on when you visited this article, you walked away with a different model of the world and of what happened, right? Biden to huddle with Senate Democrats on something. Biden urges Senate Democrats to reject poison pills that could sink relief plan, right? Completely different thing being communicated over this same article, over this same single URL, right? Nike chief executive says firm is of China and for China. Nike boss defends firm's business in China, right? And you can see the bird scores in terms of the agreement of the old headline and the new headline. Now, if we think about this from a social media angle, you read an article and you love it or you hate it and you post it on a platform. And this thing starts attracting likes and retweets and boosts and plus ones, and then the article changes. But the likes and the boosts and the retweets and the plus ones don't go away because they are of the box holding the article rather than of the thing being linked, right? So you can essentially have this phenomenon where you can start with a completely inaccurate article, clickbaity, all the wrong things. It will be boosted, shared, liked. In the next 24 hours, the platform can just make it more accurate, more subtle, nuanced, but all the initial boosting is kept, right? And it's all essentially hidden, shoved under the carpet. And so if you look at this little graph on the bottom, if you have an article that changes over time, depending on when it is that you read it, the first change or the second change, here or here, you are walking away with a different model of the world, of what happened. And the next slide may be a little bit sensitive to some, but I just urge you to focus on what it is that we're talking about. So this thing happened 2 years ago, and we have this New York Times article that starts and says, Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians say. A few hours later, the article changes. At least 500 dead in strike on Gaza hospital, Palestinians say. And then it changes a third time. At least 500 dead in blast at Gaza hospital, Palestinians say, right? And I believe it actually changed a fourth time later. So you can, and there is a whole post-mortem about what happened here, and New York Times tried to explain why this happened. So there was a big hubbub on the internet because of this, right? But from the point of view of content integrity, this is not small potatoes. Depending on when you read this article that was boosted and liked on various social media, you walked away with a different understanding of the world and of what just happened that informs the rest of your actions on that day, on that week, or possibly for the rest of your life. And another example for a person that, again, is some people love to hate, is for Elon Musk. So we had an article written about him on the New York Times where essentially it had a lot of negative things about him, right? But as a white South African, he came up at a time and place in which there was hardly a free exchange of ideas. Suddenly, this thing changed. So the red part was removed, and the green part was added. It is unclear what role in his childhood coming up in a time and a place where there was hardly free exchange, right? And then this very nuanced take at the bottom that says, but black schoolmates recall that he spent time with black friends. So if you read the original article versus the final article, you walked away with a very different understanding of who Elon Musk was. And to add insult to injury, while there was an editor's note in that article that said, hey, we made some changes, this was not mentioned. They mentioned that they got some typos that they fixed. But this very big core idea was not mentioned because it's all voluntary. There may be an editor's note, there may not be an editor's note, it may be comprehensive, it may not be comprehensive. It's entirely up to the editors and the journalists and the platform of what it is that they do. So what we have here is we have the power to always be right. We have the ability to say something and then edit it as much as we want for as far in the future as we want. And any admission of error is purely voluntary, right? And this is very different from the traditional way we used to consume information, right? When you sleep at night, your printed newspapers and your printed books don't change while you're sleeping, but these change even a second after you read them. So you have people who even ostensibly think that they're reading the same news sources, but they may have read actually different things. Because when I share a link with you, we are unable to actually predict whether we will be shown the same information, right? Even as humans, let alone JavaScript and malicious attacks. So we wrote a second article where we tracked the changes not to headlines, but the actual body of these articles, right? How are these articles changing over time and why, right? So very similar setup like before. That was published in Oakland last year. And we found that 28% of articles exhibit some sort of change, right? We did a syntactic analysis using classic Levenstein distances. We looked at the topology of changes, so you can see on the left that most changes happen at the top third of the articles, which is sort of what you would expect the change to happen. And on the right, we actually have this bar chart, this box plot graph that shows you the edit distance and the frequency of changed articles. So if you look at the very bottom, BBC, for example, changes almost half of the published articles, and the edit distance, they can be anywhere between 0.5% to 25%. And of course, you can go and you can look at different publishing venues in this graph. And unfortunately, the size of the change doesn't say much, right? Because you can add a negation in a paragraph, just a single word, and you flip the meaning of the paragraph. So these are just all proxies, imperfect proxies, for what it is that we're trying to capture. We looked at the word count before the changes and after the changes. So you see that most of these dots fall above the y equals x. So in the vast majority of cases, the articles become longer over time, not shorter over time, even though we do have that, where paragraphs disappear in the hours or days after an article was published. And now I want to show you again some examples of how things change. So we used some, again, off-the-shelf sentiment analysis algorithms. And we can see the original one, which says, this is really the MO of this administration, la, la, la. And in the post-edit, we have this new sentence that appears at the end. He added that the Biden administration is certainly behind the curve on many things, not putting Americans first, right? In the more neutral, where the new text is more neutral than the original text, you see on the left that it says that President Zelensky received a warm welcome from both sides. That part is removed in the change, and then we are told about how he invoked September 11 attacks in Pearl Harbor, right? Different messages, different things happened, this was received in a different way according to when it is that you read this article. Right? So, in the majority of cases, we have technical updates where essentially the website will tell you this thing was changed on January 5th at 12:01, but it won't tell you what was changed, right? So unless you have a system that is your memory of the web, you will not know what was changed, save for what the platform itself voluntarily tells you, which, as we saw, is highly, highly imperfect. And in certain other cases, these timestamps are even hidden. You have to actually click on various UI parts, like on The Guardian, to see what is the last modified date. Right? So this is my story, and as we're closing, I want to bring this to you as to where it is that we want to go from here, right? When I present this talk to people, some say, well, I don't care, right? The website changes, fine, no problem, right? But some of you hopefully don't feel that way, right? The web is too important to be so flippant about it, right? This core information, whether it is something that is fed into JavaScript or whether it's something that's fed into your brain, we have no notion of integrity, right? We have the Wayback Machine that may pass at the right time and may capture a change, and that's it. That's how we build the web, right? And we constantly link to boxes that can change at any given point in time. And so I think there is a way forward where we may want to detect changes like we did in these papers, but also maybe protect against them, right? So you can essentially have systems that shine a light on mostly honest actors, right? So I'm sure that New York Times tries their best, but why are these things happening? Could we do something better, right? If you look at this bottom right, could we actually have a Git diff-like system for our news, where you, as a citizen of the web, when you visit an article, you will be told what changed, right? Hey, you're reading this now, here's how this thing changed over the last days or over the last hours, right? And maybe with all the AI, LLM interest, maybe now is the right time to start building this assisting technology that, given some sort of ground truth, hopefully not just from the Wayback Archive, that the user can be told, hey, this thing that you read last week changed. Would you like to read it again? The thing that you liked on Twitter changed. Would you like to read it again? So, in conclusion, integrity is this idea that we want to protect data from improper or unauthorized changes. And I hope that I was able to impart this to you as a filter for the rest of the world, and as a way to join many of these seemingly disjoint attacks that we keep discovering, we keep giving different names to. This integrity, because we live on this digital world, it requires conscious defending, right? A printed book defends itself, but the online article doesn't. It needs our help to actually defend itself, to defend it, right? In this digital first world. In this custodial world, where you don't own even the ebook, you just own the right to access this on the platform, right? And so I think there's many opportunities for all of us to do great work going forward, and even for a lot of non-security people, right? I would love to sit down with journalists and ask them about this, with psychologists to compare how users react to the before versus the after, right? Devise new NLP techniques to actually analyze these changes and go from there. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Your hand, I'll give you, there's a mic over there. You can line up and ask questions.
Hey, Nick. This is Alex. So, great talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
The problems that you mentioned, we have the technology to solve them, right? So we have sub-resource integrity for the scripts, so you can put the hash of the script so that you can basically say if the content doesn't match of the script, don't load it. And all browsers support it, so that's fantastic. For even article changes, we have things like IPFS, right? So in the interplanetary file system, where the URL actually is the hash of the content. Right? So if you change something in the content, the actual URL changes, so now you can point to the specific content that you're referring to, right? But you know, in the spirit of also supply chain security, like it's really hard to, when you do your dependencies, it's really hard to pin the dependency to a particular version. You know, if you do that, then you have to do extra work. Same for sub-resource integrity, same for the content hashing, right? So we have the technology to combat this, but it seems to be like there is a gap of how the hell do we actually use this stuff together in a way that is usable for the world, right? So do you have any thoughts on that?
Right. So you are 100% right. We have the technology for strict checks, right? So for JavaScript, just hash the thing. If it changes, the hash will change, right? But as you know, right, this will only cover 1% of the scripts because we do want the others to change, right? We do want them to patch their vulnerabilities and update their features. So we have some papers that show that SRI is very poorly adopted, right? And in the real world with English, not even JavaScript, that's even harder, right? Because I want to allow you to fix your typo, but I don't want you to hoodwink me, right, and completely flip the meaning. So I think there is this messy middle that we're lacking, both for code as well as for human communications. And I don't have any excellent answers for that. I think we need these different people going after different directions. Some, I think, need to interface with real people, put them behind screens and say, this is the before, this is the after. How do you feel about this? Do you actually, does this communicate something different to you? If this would change without you being told, would you be upset, right? And I think, again, the LLM is obviously a big thing now that we could say, hey, does this meaningfully, is the difference meaningful for a user? So it's this messy middle, and I don't have great answers, but I hope I can convince some people to work on this messy middle.
It's our next paper.
Thank you.
Hi, Elijah Bauman-Sims from Carnegie Mellon University. I do human subjects research, so I see this very human subjects-y angle, but I'm curious if you have, you talked briefly about Reddit users using Flare to indicate that headlines have changed. There's other sort of like discussion on these communities where people will point out changes like this just more broadly. So I'm wondering if you've thought about, if you've looked at that sort of discussion
Right.
more, and whether that could be something that you could use as a signal to help identify these types of things.
So we haven't done this. I think that's an excellent idea, right? Either mining the subreddit itself or going to social media, because actually you have citizen journalists that discover this and say, look what the Wayback Machine says, look what it says now, right? And actually mining this instead of conducting user studies, I think it would be an excellent idea.
Nick, can you tell us how many domains you have registered throughout your lifetime?
More than 100.
Machine you've been using, how do we know nobody have changed that? I'm curious.
We don't. No. You just trust that they're good guys and that they will not change the content that they crawl. And that they have no vulnerabilities, which we know they did, right? That would somehow change the data that they index.
It's like For code, you can say this is malicious because it's, the definition of malicious behavior for code is clear. But when you talk about sentiment writing, some people write inflammatory editorial on purpose, right? So for there, it's a gray area. Do you have a sense of, it's our community, the right community to go into this, or we should actually work with, social scientists to work on this?
I think it's great to work with social scientists, right? And I think it's less of your original style because, I know how Limin writes and I like Limin, so I read her stuff, but it's about the delta, right? It's about the changes that happen after something is published that are completely, hidden, and we need to build our own memory systems to account for them. Yeah.
Hey, really interesting work. I was wondering, did you see cases in which advertisements or products are changed? So you link to something, say, hey, buy this thing, you gave enough traffic to that company, and then you change.
Right, we haven't. I anecdotally know that some Amazon sellers do this as a scam, where they sell something, it gets a lot of stars and ratings and reviews, and then apparently they have the ability to change the title and the description and even the picture, and so now suddenly they're selling something else on the same page, but they have kept all the reviews that they have. So now you're buying a thing that is fresh off the boat, but it appears that it's been purchased thousands of times with 5-star reviews. So we haven't looked at this in terms of a study, but I think these phenomena exist pretty much everywhere that you look for them.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead. Thank you. Do you believe that transparency measures, for example, when it comes to that New York Times article that changed over time, that clearly people would take away something very different? Do you think that transparency measures would help or hurt? Like, do you think that they would increase the trust in the platform or reduce the trust in the platform?
That's an excellent question. I guess it depends on what the platform does, right? If through the transparency we show that 99% of the time my changes are, typo fixes or dynamic updates, that will be great, right? But if this actually reveals that I'm engaging in this post-publication edits where I hedge and I fix and I take away the things that were always wrong, that will decrease trust. But, that's probably a good thing, right? Because these were happening apparently since the beginning of the web, and we just had no eyes on them. So I would like to believe that the popular, news outlets on any side of the aisle would want to engage in this and convince the readers at a time where we have this all-time low of media trust, that they're actually, at least on that front, that they are honest players.
Thank you. We can only hope that would increase media literacy in this day and age. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Nick, nice work. One of the things that I took away from this is there is perhaps a simple brute force solution, and I think you perhaps alluded to it, which is you keep crawling the same news article, and then you check for changes. And I guess you can build this kind of a service for a specific person who is tweeting and cares about this, whether the content they have tweeted has changed and may have repercussions. So is there any hope of scaling that simple solution?
Right. So what you said will work, and that's a little bit similar to what we built. Now you just have another centralized authority of trust, right? Now you have to trust me that I'm not editing the articles at night to badmouth your favorite news outlet. So it would scale if it's centralized. But I think perhaps we want to try something else, right? I see opportunities for local memory where you don't have, you're not talking to any third-party services, but your browser, which we call user agent because it's supposed to do things on your behalf, it maybe keeps a cache of the things that you read. On the background in the coming weeks and months, it recrawls them, throws everything in an LLM, and you get a notification that said the thing you read last month has changed, right? So you could build this in a completely offline fashion. There may be opportunities for decentralized blockchain things here. I think there's a lot of sort of blue sky ideas possible in this space.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the talk. I have the triangle here. I want to comment on that about availability. So there's something happened on the web, especially in some part like China, for example, the web become more fragmented. So that means like, for example, the news articles like under like WeChat, only certain people like with a certain account can see that like a comment. And also, for example, like behind TikTok, similarly, like they only push something that you like. So I just want to know your opinion, like how would that affect the future of the web, especially like some of the content may not be always available, even crawlable, as we always see in the traditional web.
Yeah, you're right. So I think this is a separate problem. I think some people call this the balkanization of the web, right, where different parts of the web are accessible to different people. There may be some use for that, right, maybe. Some people will disagree, where if I have this, let's say, Long Island specific business, I don't know, I'm baking cakes for Long Islanders, why do I need traffic from Europe? Why do I need traffic from Asia? So maybe that's a way that I actually can let go of a lot of the, at least the easy attacks, right? But others will argue and say, no, open web, any link should be accessible by anyone. So you're right, this is a problem, but I would probably say that this is a different problem, because either you can access something or you cannot access this. In this case, you can access something, but the something keeps changing.
Thanks.
Sure.
Up question. So your crawl is mostly from the perspective of US websites. Have you done any crawl in other parts of the world seeing similar things?
No, we haven't. There was a paper that did this for Portuguese news websites. So there is, I don't remember, we're citing it in the paper. So different people at different times have, just looked at this and went away. But we haven't looked at anything that is not US based. So more opportunities for work for others.
Going back to this very early, this Twitter scam, where this one actually took over the account. There are also typo involved as well, right? Have anybody done study to actually look into this to see how widespread this is?
So for the typos in the URLs?
Trying to steal payments, essentially.
Right. Yeah, so in that paper, we had built a classifier that tries to detect whether the URL that you're linking is accidental. So it will stop you and say, you're linking to this. Are you sure you want to link to that? And it depends, if the URL is in the middle of a sentence, there's a larger chance that it was accidental, right? If the TLD is an English word, like an article, there's a higher chance that it was accidental. So we did that, right? But if you intended to, to link to something, but you link to something else, like a typo squatting attack, I don't think we've done that. And to be honest, I don't know who has looked at that. Yeah.
One last call. All right, thanks, speaker again. Now we have a break coming up.
Thank you.